Good evening, buonasera in italiano. I want to welcome everybody to this series of webinar that the IIBA is started. And I want to thank all the organization. I want to welcome everybody with this series of webinar that are very important, and I want to thank you FCP, Formazione Continua in Psicologia, for having the collaboration with the IIBA for to start this, make this project possible. Now I will start to, I want to give the place to Claude Tové, that is the webinar master, the IIBA, that will give the instruction how to better use this webinar, because he speaks and it's better than me in English. Thank you, Claude.
Thank you, Patricia. So, welcome. We remind you that these webinars are presented entirely in English, that there is a simultaneous translation service in 5 other languages.
Claude, I think you have to tell the people how to go to the channel, how to select the language.
Yeah. Okay, so 5 other languages than English: Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Russian. If you want to follow the webinars in English, do nothing, because all communications and speakers' presentation will be entirely in English. Now, if you want to follow webinars in other languages, you have to go to the toolbar that you will find at the bottom of the Zoom window. If you don't see this toolbar, please move your cursor on the Zoom window and the toolbar will show up. Select the globe echo that activates the interpretation function. A list open with 6 languages, and select your language and follow the live translation.
Okay.
We also remind you that throughout the course of the webinar, you can ask questions to the speakers. These questions will, however, be selected and read only in the final parts dedicated to question time. Please write your questions in English. The questions in other languages cannot be translated live and therefore cannot be chosen. To ask your question, you will need to use the Zoom question and answer function. You will find this function once again in the toolbar at the bottom of the Zoom window, with an icon looking as 2 speech bubbles. Please do not use the chat function for these questions. Chat functions is the icon looking as a single bubble. Only general communication addressed to all participants and technical information will be given by the webinar staff using this chat function. All this interaction will be in the chat section. So if you need more information, go to the chat function for this functional explanation. Patricia, it's your turn.
Okay, thank you, Claude. It's an honor for me to introduce you this webinar, and I think there is an honor for all the IIBA that Guy Tonella will start with this first series of webinar. I want to thank you again, all the staff also of the Formazione Continua in Psicologia, because with the other, they take this project possible, and Guy, because he offered himself to start with this subject that is very important for to make the people understanding more what is the basis of the bioenergetic analysis and what is the evolution that is even more important. I would say that there is a lot to say about Guy, but I want to say that Guy Tonella is a clinical psychology, is French, is being professor and researcher of psychology for 20 years at the university in Paris and Toulouse. He is a bioenergetic practitioner since the 1980, and also is very interesting because he worked for some years with schizophrenic young adult and in psychiatric hospital. And what is very important and very important for us, and for, I think very interesting for the whole community, that he did that with the body-mind psychotherapy. He's a member of the French College of Bioenergetic Analysis. He's an IIBA faculty trainer, international trainer. And for 30 years, everybody in the bioenergetic community knows Guy Tonella, because he's been working in French, Belgium, Holland, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Canada, Brazil, Argentina, New Zealand, and China. So, and now all the people from the other parts of the world can enjoy and see his teaching. I think what it seems is Guy has been always interested in problematic relating with infant research, a young adult, attachment, trauma, and self-regulation, neurobiological, neuroscience and integration is the core and the interest of its own theory. Is training and practice bioenergetic analysis. He published many articles, and I think you will very enjoy his webinar today. Thank you, Guy, for to accept this invitation, really, with my heart.
Grazie mille, Patrizia. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here with you for beginning this series of webinars. I feel very happy to meet you sometimes for the first time. And if this is the case, I hope to make you love bioenergetic analysis. So, in that first webinar, I will present first the bioenergetic basics, and then the evolution of bioenergetic analysis from the last 50s until today. And this is really a great pleasure for me to do that, because just now I remember when I met Alexander Lowen in New York in '79 to begin therapy with him. And that's so a long time until today. He is forever in my soul. And I know that many of my colleagues, whether in the faculty of the IIBA, had many times sharing with him. So, if first I tell you something about the birth of bioenergetic analysis, I would say that it was created by Dr. Alexander Lowen in New York in the 50. It is based on the work of Wilhelm Reich, a disciple and contemporary of Sigmund Freud. Freud realized that the so-called psychological problems like inhibitions, anxieties, depression, phobias, obsessions, etc., that these so-called psychological problems were the consequence of unresolved conflicts experienced in childhood, during childhood. They were leading to an unsatisfactory emotional and sexual life. However, the patient didn't remember these conflicts because they were repressed in the unconscious with the corresponding emotions like fear, anger, sorrow, despair, etc. Freud had then conceived a method, psychoanalysis, offering to speak freely in an associative way to go back up to the unconscious thoughts, to the painful memories against which the patient struggled not to suffer, which was inhibiting his current life. So what Reich discovered was that the conflicts and traumas of childhood had not only provoked psychological reactions, but also physical, bodily reactions intended to block the emotions aroused by the conflict or trauma. These reactions took the form of muscular tensions, contractions of certain regions of the body, literally holding the emotional charge in the body and preventing its expression. Obviously, the consequences of such reactions were multiple. The person became rigid, lost a more or less important part of his or her spontaneity and expressiveness, lost his or her quality of contact with others, and became impoverished in his or her capacity to love, to desire, to feel happy. On the other hand, physical symptoms could appear later because of a tense organism submits its organs and physiological functions to a constant pressure. Muscular, articular, circulatory, cardiac affections, etc., can then occur. The treatment of so-called psychological problems took on another dimension with Reich. It involved not only the mind, but now also the body. How to release these psychological and physical defensive mechanism in order to reestablish the continuity in the whole living being, the unity, reestablish a unity between what was experienced, thought, and acted. This is where Freud and Reich would be part way. Freud thought that he could solve these problems by psychological and verbal means alone. Reich showed the limits of this approach. Learning to know the origin of one's difficulties and expressing it verbally were necessary, of course, but not sufficient. Reich showed that the body was retaining its muscular and postural tensions built up since childhood in response to conflict and trauma. The consequences is that the inner sensory, emotional, and motor movements that allowed one to experience love and remain stuck, frozen, and impoverished. Reich will discover that it is necessary to free the energetic flows, the drive sequestered by bodily tensions, so that they could give new vigor to the experiences of the present life and lead to satisfaction and pleasure. In the 1930s, Reich found a new therapeutic practice, so involving simultaneous psychic and bodily work. He develops a theoretical model and a practical psychosomatic model. Lowen, a patient and student of Reich's, is inspired by him to create bioenergetic analysis in the 1950s. In order to understand the specificity of bioenergetic analysis and its therapeutic power, it is necessary to enter more precisely into its Lowenian founding principles. So I would like now to present theoretical and practical basis of bioenergetic analysis. And first, the energetic functioning of the human being. What we call energy in bioenergetic analysis is the product of metabolism, which transforms food, liquids, oxygen brought by breathing, etc. It is a force which acts inside the body and gives it vitality. It is originally used to maintain one's own life and, through sexuality, to preserve spacing. It can also be sublimated in professional, cultural, and social activities. All these activities generate sensations, emotions, movements, images, thoughts. They confirm the existence of oneself, of one's identity in constant evolution all along the life. Two main functions organize this vital force, this energetic dynamic. First, expansion-contraction function. The metabolism produces energy flows that are directed from the center of the organism, of the body, to its periphery. This dynamic creates a movement of expansion, which is the origin of the movement of expression, action, and communication. Muscle contraction, however, can interrupt that dynamic and prevent this flow from reaching the periphery. Thus, inhibiting expression, action, and communication. If this response, muscle contraction, becomes chronic, it restricts or blocks expression, action, and communication. Second point for defining energetic functioning of the human being after expansion, contraction is pulsating and undulatory function. In all living organisms, energetic flows oriented from the center to the periphery of the organism are rhythmic. All the energetic flows are rhythmic. This continuous alternation of expansion and contraction produces rhythmic pulsations. These rhythmic pulsations animate the whole of the living, from the amoeba to the man, and produce the sensation of being alive. This is because I vibrate that I feel alive. On the other hand, the segmental organization of the vertebrates from the snake to the man complexifies this pulsating function. To the pulsating function is added another one, the undulatory function, like the snake. When, however, the pulsating undulatory movements are interrupted by muscular tensions, for instance, no more movement is generated within the organism. The state of vitality, sensory and emotional, decrease considerably until they are no longer perceived. The organism is depressed or dead. Finally, it's necessary to regulate the energetic flow, this energetic force, so that it does not overwhelm us with its intensity, nor does it overwhelm others. How can we do this? We can regulate ourselves, regulating this energetic functioning. First, regulating this energetic functioning by a co-integration pendulum movement of opposed experience. The vital process at all levels of the self swing like a pendulum between extremes. For example, between inspiratory breathing in and expiratory breathing out movement continually, between pleasure and pain, between contraction and relaxation, between love and hate, between yes and no. At the beginning of life, this pendulum movement jumped from an extreme to the other, as in the baby. The baby must learn to build bridges between the extremes, to co-integrate the opposites, and to inscribe a center of reference halfway between each of these extremes. The center will become center of the self, center of gravity of a verticalized self. The regulation of that force, second point, is also regulation by a pendulum movement between functional bipolarities. The energetic dynamic of the human being are also organized by three major opposed bipolarity. Here again, it is necessary to regulate the pendulum movement between these opposites. The first opposite, the functional bit, is the functional bipolarity between the energetic charge provided by the upper half of the organism and, second, the energetic discharge provided by the lower half of the organism. The organism seeks their balance or energetic balance between up and down, and the principle of grounding is derived from this. Lowen invented this principle of grounding. It preserves the ability to direct energy to the ground and thus not overload the brain functions. There is a second functional bipolarity we have to regulate. It's a functional bipolarity between, first, sensory and tender expression provided by the whole of the tissues, muscular among others, of the anterior part of the organism. And that anterior part of the organism are the tissues, the muscles for expressing tenderness and love. Second point, on the posterior part of the organism are the motor and aggressive impulsions. The organism seeks the balance and the union between tender flows and aggressive flows. We have also to seek the balance between a third bipolarity, between, first, the flows that come up and ascending flows of physiological excitation directed toward the cerebral functions for intellectual work. And second, flows of excitation that are directed towards the genital zone and the musculature of actions. That flows that are going down are motor and sexual flows. The organism as also to balance the flows coming up and the flows coming down, and to co-integrate these antithetical flows. In order to respond to these multiple needs of regulations I was talking about, multiple resource exercises were initially created by Alexander Lowen and described in his books, then enriched by the following generations of therapists. The most classic ones involve first breathing and the breathing stool that helps to open the rib cage and block the diaphragm, relax and move the abdomen. Very important exercises are done on the stool and through breathing, of course. Second kind of exercise, famous exercise in bioenergetic analysis, is kicking. Kicking means hitting, lying down with arms and legs. And this kind of movements open the body, relieve the body, increase vitality, help for aggressiveness and filling up existing deeply. Another kind of exercise is what we call reaching out. Reaching out with knees slightly bent, arms stretched out in front, hands open, as if you were going to hug someone. So now, this exercise is mobilizing tenderness, love. How can I reach the other? How can I affirm myself in this tender movement of communication with the other? Another one, other exercise is the famous grounding. The grounding. Lowen invented that exercise that is really used now in many other schools of body-mind therapy. The grounding means standing with feet firmly planted in the ground, torso bent downward, hands open and resting on the ground. How to be in contact with the earth. Lowen showed and helped many persons through the exercise of grounding. To be grounding in the earth means to be grounded in reality. This is the sense of that exercise. Another famous exercise is hitting with the tennis racket. Hitting with the tennis racket, standing with feet firmly planted on the ground, hit with a racket on a large cushion placed in front of you at a distance, and if possible at pelvic level. And again, it's a very complete exercise to breathe and then to feel force with a tennis racket. And really, it's a very fundamental, important exercise with practice in bioenergetic exercise. Of course, we have many others, but we have no time here now to describe all of it. If you are interested, come with us and discover all that. Okay, so I would like now to share with you what is the evolution of bioenergetic analysis since Lowen until today. Bioenergetic analysis has evolved over the decades, incorporating complementary theoretical and clinical aspects that enriched bioenergetic analysis, theoretical perspectives as well as its practice. Here are the more essential ones. First, I would like to present you the ESMER model for the development of the self. You will see what means ESMER. The self, our self, is the house where we live in all along our life. And like for building a house, we build our self step by step. These are the tasks of infancy, above all during the 3 first years. And the self, that house, has 5 floors. So let us see what are the 5 floors of that house. The first floor, how is the first function of the self? The energetic function. The energetic function is the most primitive vital function. The metabolic function that produces energy for the very functioning of the organism. These vital processes gives rise to states of vitality and provides us with a bodily consciousness of existing. It is a quantitative process. Right now, listening to me, are you breathing? Are you breathing enough? Are you feeding this organism, yourself, through breathing? That breathing function, very fundamental function. So just take a time together for breathing. Breathing in, open mouth, and breathing out. This is very simple. That's fundamental function. If we don't breathe enough, we are not alive enough. Okay, the second floor of the house, of the self, house is the second function. That is the sensory function. Sensory function collects 3 types of information. Interoceptive informations. These are the sensations providing information on the inside world, like I feel hunger, or I feel fatigue. These are the interoceptive sensations. We receive also information from our body. These are proprioceptive sensations. Sensation providing information from our posture, how we are, and from the movement of our bodies. This sensation is a third kind of sensations that are exteroceptive sensations. Exteroceptive sensations provide informations of the outside world from the 5 senses we have, like seeing now each other, or looking at the other, or smelling the atmosphere. These sensations provide us with a qualitative bodily consciousness about how we feel present and alive. Through this body sensation, we feel present and alive. And of course, this is now a qualitative process. If we just take time right now, just 10 seconds, we can have impressions of how we are, maybe sitting on a chair, maybe standing up. What movement are we doing or not? How do we feel our body through these sensations? The third floor of our house, our self, houses the third function, the muscular or motor function. Variations in muscle tone produces movements for action and interaction. If we act or interact, it is because we have muscles we use to produce these movements. On another hand, distribution of muscular tone throughout the body operates as a tonic muscular envelope, delimiting the boundaries of the self, containing and regulating self-expression. So, muscular tone offers boundaries for the self, and also muscular tone is at the origin of movements for action and interaction. Can you right now take 30 seconds just lightly to move your shoulders like me, and just to move your arms and hands, and just to stretch a little bit, breathing, and just including in you sit on your chair, move the pelvis, and also move the legs and the feet, breathing, and finally you're the body. Wow. We are mobilizing that third floor of ourself, that muscular floor. And of course, this is very important. In the evolution of the living, muscles came in third position. Before the 4 function I will talk now. The 4th floor houses the fourth function, the emotional function. Variation in sensory information, the changes in our sensations, body sensations, whether it comes from inside the body or from the environment, produce variation in the emotional state. Through expression, emotional function plays a cathartic role in the regulation of the self. For instance, laughing out feels so good, isn't it? It's necessary to laugh out. A day without laughing out is a lost day, sure. Emotional expression plays also a role of subjective communication with the social environment. Being sensitive to the others through these affective, emotional expressions, implicit expressive emotions, at least associated to cognitive information. Emotions give a sense, a signification to the current situation. What I think is directly connected with what I feel emotionally. This gives a sense to what is happening for me right now, here. So, for instance, maybe you could take again 10 seconds just to identify how you feel at this emotional level. What affective impressions you have. Even if it's some more intellectual work we are doing, probably hearing, listening, you feel something at the emotional level, being all together. Just take the time. What word would you choose to name what you are emotionally feeling right now? Okay? You did it? You have your word? Good. So we can continue. We can continue with the fifth and last floor of that house of the self. It is the function of representation. And now, in the evolution of the living, the typical human function, that function of representation. Through representations, we constantly translate our body states into images, words, symbols. This is the floor of the cognition, of the thoughts. This ability to represent and understand what is happening in and around you, allow to think, to create, and to act appropriately. When we are in connection now, talking of the self, of that house, of course, we are thinking a lot together. We are taking this representation, this image of the house, to talk about what is the self, and its 5 functions, we are mobilizing deeply this 5th function of the self. So we have 5 floors in that house self. But it's very important, of course, to develop a continuum between the extremes of each floor. That process means moving from an initial, immature, bipolar functioning in or I hate you or I love you, towards a more mature associative functioning and I love you even if sometimes I hate you. So neurobiological maturation, where they gradually have the little child, during the 3 first years to build bridges between the opposites, between pleasure and pain, between hyper and hypotonicity, between love and hate, etc. If the child doesn't succeed to build these bridges between the extremes in each floor of the house, the function of the self will remain split, and the adult will continue to exist in these extremes. I love you or I hate you, or. And of course, later in therapy, we will, as adults, have to build these bridges between the opposites in the function where it is missing. But we have also to build stairs between these 5 floors. This process means connecting each of these floors to each other so that the self becomes a psychosomatic or body-mind continuity. Like in information, so whatever floor it comes from can circulate throughout the house, up and down, and this process is that of mindfulness, of the development of global integration of the experience. Like in a house, it then becomes possible to move from one floor to another, stairs connecting each of the floor to the others. In neurobiological terms, it becomes possible to orient your perceptual consciousness on the chosen floor, muscular or emotional, or to move from one floor to another, from emotional floor to what means that emotion, the floor of representation. But if stairs are missing between each floor, consciousness cannot take this walk and develop a global awareness of whom we are. The self will be in a state of non-integration or of dissociation, which is a manifestation of attachment trauma. So we have to build bridges between the extremes. In each floor, we have to build stairs between the floors to travel up and down. But we have also to build walls, doors and windows in order to delimit one's house. It is necessary to perceive one's own body boundaries. First, in order to feel oneself as a whole, well differentiated from others. Second, in order to contain his physiological excitation flows, like sensations, emotions, movements. And third, in order to protect oneself from intrusions and abuses. Indeed, a house has walls to separate outside from inside and allow intimacy with oneself. It also has doors and windows that can intentionally open or close, to let go out or to let come in, according to what we decide. The muscular tonic envelope constitutes the wall of our house, the walls of our self. It can be more or less tense or relaxed. It is also extremely important to learn to open or not the doors and windows of oneself, to be more or less in contact with our outside world as much as let it enter in. If you cannot build the walls, doors, and windows of your house, you will be very vulnerable later. You could be invaded, abused, but you also will not be able to contain what will flow inside of you, to contain your emotions. Without doors and windows to contain your emotional flows inside your house, you can be also invasive. And finally, you will be in a constant state of alert, not being invasive, not being invaded. You will be in a state of constant dysregulation. So now we are describing what is our Esmer model. All that I have just presented converges towards what I have called the Esmer model. In this model, the self presents 5 basic levels of organization. The 5 floors of the house described previously. The energetic function, the sensory function, the muscular function, emotional function, and function of representation. This is Esmer. Each function supports the next and is built on the previous. The variation which occur in one of the functions of the self cause variations in the whole of the functions, like a moving wave. I'm sorry, my phone. Now I would like to talk about how are interconnected these 5 functions. The 4 interconnections between the 5 functions. Evolution managed to organize the self into an integrated and self-regulated system by developing connections or links between each of the 5 functions. These interconnections are the stairs I described between each floor of the house. More precisely, the 4 interconnection stairs between the 5 functions were theorized during the first half of the 20th century. Concretely, Freud described the link between the function of representation and the emotional function. This affective representational link results from the functional connections between emotional function and function of representation. It creates thought patterns connected with feelings that all along life are organizing our cognitive comprehensions and guides our actions. Reich described the link between emotional function and muscular function. This tonic emotional link results from the functional connections between muscular function and emotional function. It creates tonic emotional patterns using movements and postures for organizing expressiveness and action and interaction. Then Piaget described the link between muscular function and sensory function. This sensory motor link results from the functional connection between sensory function and muscular function. It creates sensory motor schemes and patterns that organize our actions and interactions. At last, Lowen described the link between sensory function and energetic function. This somatosensory link results from the functional connections between energetic function and sensory functions. It creates specific states Daniel Stern calls affects of vitality, constantly regulated by homeostatic processes. Now, we have also 4 relational modes. We develop since birth 4 relational modes that correspond to the interactive links. The self, to remain co-integrated, will have a constant need of regulation. For that reason, it is going to develop during the first 2 years, and thanks to the relation with the mother, 4 successive relational modes of regulation of the self. The first mode is the existential mode. Okay. It is based on the feeling of being alive in presence of each other. So simple, but so fundamental. Feeling alive in presence of each other. The second relational mode in the interactional mode is based on body interactions, gestures, and movements. Between 2 and 8 months of age, the baby, the little child is developing this interactional mode, the movements. Then appear the intersubjective mode. Intersubjective mode between 8 and 15 months. It is based on the exchange with the other of personal sensory emotional states. I will show you what I feel and show me what you feel. And then at least the discursive mode. It is when the child really begins to talk and to think and begin to discuss with mommy, daddy, etc. and want to understand what is, how is the word and begin to ask why and why and why this and why that. So we will use all along the life these 4 relational modes, including in therapy. Sometimes some people couldn't really develop 1, 2, or 3 or 4 of these modes, and they will have in therapy to experientially create and 1 or more of these modes, relational modes. Okay. Another big integration we did in bioenergetic analysis, theoretical integration, is the integration of attachment theory. Theory of attachment was developed by the British psychoanalyst John Bowlby in the 1960s. He studied the specificity of mother-baby relationship and developed a theory of the attachment bond. And then on the different attachment patterns that develop during infancy between 0 and 2 years of age. It turns out that there is a great proximity between the 3 insecure attachment patterns developing during infancy, as defined by Bowlby, and the 3 characters developing during infancy, as defined by Lowen. First, the anxious avoidant attachment pattern, Bowlby, is at the origin of the schizophrenic character, Lowen. Second, the anxious ambivalent attachment pattern, Bowlby, is at the origin of the oral character, Lowen. And then the disorganized, disoriented attachment pattern, Bowlby, is at the origin of the borderline personality, Lowen. The theoretical articulation offers us an extremely rich clinical perspective. Each of these 3 personality structures immediately reactivates transfers in therapy its attachment pattern with its specific defensive reactions. The therapeutic perspective will then be to move from an insecure attachment pattern to a more secure attachment pattern. This involves therapeutic interactions, some nonverbal work, and body transformations. The bioenergetic therapist, therefore, has this essential function of helping his or her patients to discover or rediscover or develop what the secure attachment relationship is. This attachment relationship consists of 6 properties, organizing and regulating all future social relationships. I will describe rapidly these 6 properties. The first one is mutual intentionality. It designates the conscious interpersonal determinations to express one's intentions and to interact with others. The baby, since the first days of life, develop this intentionality to interact with in family, with mother, with father, sisters, etc. The second property of the attachment bond is mutual synchronization. It designates the interpersonal effort aimed at synchronizing the rhythmic aspect of the exchanges, responding to another neither too early nor too late. It has the effect of synchronizing physiological rhythmicity, like breathing, for instance, and relational rhythmicity. The third property is affective attunement. This is just about adjusting to the person's emotional state, both in the nonverbal mode, through vocal, miming, postural, gestural, tactile, micro adjustments, as well as, when it makes sense, in the verbal mode. These echoes, resonances, affective vibrations phenomena participate in the feeling of being received and understood. The fourth property is containment. Muscular and its variation of tonicity offer a container to the flow of excitation so that they can be metabolized, not to be oneself overflowed or and overwhelmed, nor to overflow and overwhelm the other. The fifth property of attachment bonds is the regulation of vitality and sensory emotional states. This involves maintaining internal homeostasis between the two extremes of hyperarousal and hypoarousal. The arousal flows thus regulating, the arousal flows thus regulated can then be contained, tolerated, and oriented towards thoughts followed by action. At least the sixth property of attachment bonds is repair. In interpersonal relationships, It follows a law of attunement, a desynchronization, or a loss of containment or emotional self-regulation. This implies recognizing one's own failure, transforming negative feelings that it generates into positive feelings, and re-establish mutual intimate communication. And you know, ability to repair increases one's resiliency capacity. This is demonstrated. The 6 properties enfold the germ of social values such as justice, ethics, and peace, which are embodied in cultural, artistic, sport, and scientific manifestations. Several interactive exercises has been created for discovering, developing each of these 6 properties. Very rich exercises that can help persons that couldn't have such good attachment bonds, including adults suffering from what is a good attachment bond. I would like to talk a little bit now again also about the integration of contemporary neurobiological models and the enrichment of the concept of character. The contemporary bioenergetic approach is also correlated to developments in contemporary neurobiology. For example, Matsuzawa's work showed that in children aged between 0 and 2 years, repetitive dysregulated experiences can lead to body-mind dissociation and split into various parts of the self. They will become biological mechanisms repeated later unconsciously in the adult. Another researcher, Perry's work, shows that these repetitive procedures are engraved, impressed in the child maturating brain and end up remaining as personality traits that are later expressed both psychically and physically. This validates the Reichian and then Lowenian concept of character, especially in its pre-verbal origins. Last example, Stephen Porges, with his polyvagal theory, puts it into play, as it before Reich and then Lowen, the autonomic nervous system and its regulating effects of optimal physiological activation. In the case of physiological dysregulating hyperactivation or hypoactivations. Porges specifies the neurobiological basis of the bioenergetic practices and exercises of sensory emotional self-regulations. Porges clarifies the differences between a flexible and adaptive autonomic nervous system regulating emotional experiences and offering the self a large area of optimal physiological activation. This area is in red on that scheme. Also specify the difference with an autonomic nervous system that is fixed in an extreme polarity of chronic sympathetic hyperexcitation reducing the area of optimal activation. This is in red on the schema. And this is the case of the oral character. Poesis also show the difference with an autonomic nervous system that is fixed in an extreme polarity of chronic dorsal parasympathetic excitation, hypoexcitation, reducing the area of optimal activation in red on the schema. And this is the case of the schizoid character with this inner immobilization. At last, it showed the difference with an autonomic nervous system that is fixed in continuous oscillations from one extreme to the other. And it is the case of the borderline state. This understanding of the neurobiological functioning of the human organism is therefore extremely useful to us bioenergetic analysts. It allows us to adjust our methodological and technical choices on the basis of new and expanding understandings. And I would like also say something about the multi-referential approach to trauma we have today. First, we have techniques for reprogramming instinctual responses. Post-traumatic stress fueled by unresolved trauma can, however, disrupt or paralyze the three types of pre-programmed defense responses by the limbic system to a threat. They are fighting, flight, or freeze response. It is therefore necessary to revitalize these three types of response when they have been blocked by the trauma and can be sometimes in the adult be still blocked. We have also today techniques for reenacting factual trauma. Peter Levin proposed to restate the traumatic situation in order to release the energy sequestered in the nervous system in the form of chronic sympathetic hyperactivity or chronic parasympathetic immobilization. Specific techniques contribute to this. Lowen invented also post-traumatic stress relief techniques. Lowen was the first to develop a series of bioenergetic exercises to help release stress, which is called stress muscle exercises. These exercises put the musculature in a state of voluntary stress in order to train the body to respond with tremors as involuntary movement to release stress. Lowen has created stress exercises to help the body retain its ability to shake. And more recently, David Bursley put them together in a particular sequence from head to toe that he called trauma releasing exercises. These exercises are designed to stretch, stimulate, and fatigue the muscles that inhibit shaking and oppose the physical release of post-traumatic stress. And at last, we develop techniques to rebuild the traumatized relational bonds. Trauma and post-traumatic stress can lead to a loss of a sense of security and self-confidence, of course. They can induce fear of others, sometimes phobic behavior, fear of groups, fear of transportation, etc. I brought together existing exercises and created others centered on the relationship and aiming to bring back to the self the essential feelings of security and confidence in the relationship with others. Exercises to develop a sense of optimal distance. Exercises to reestablish interpersonal eye contact. Exercises to reestablish hand contact. To reestablish supportive physical contact. And to develop a sense of emotional closeness. And at last, we included a multi-referential approach to the therapeutic relationship, including, of course, the classical analytical mode with transferential mode and intersubjective mode. Therapeutic relationship is historically based on the analytical technique in Freud, Reich, and Lowen. Therapeutic relationship was then defined in terms of analytical relationship with its corollary, the transferential relationship. The third type of therapeutic relationship, the intersubjective relationship, has however emerged over the last 3 decades, marked by direct observation of the mother-baby relationship, particularly concerning the properties of the attachment system. Contemporary neurobiological investigation also concerning the maturation of the brain, and at least the joint evolution of the social model and the psychopathology, showing a progressive growth of traumatic preverbal pathology and narcissistic deficits. So the limits of the analytical situation are due to the fact that the preverbal emotional experiences encoded in procedural memory are not yet inscribed in an object relationship with another one. These preverbal emotional experiences are imprinted in the field of preverbal attachment and, when reactivated, will be projected as projected identification in the therapeutic field, not on the therapist. In response, the therapist will initiate an intersubjective relationship based on exchanges of a sensory emotional nature. It will become a source of echoes, progressively structuring and clarifying for a patient. Jeremy, one of my patients, autistic with Asperger's syndrome, told me at the end of a session, we only become human when we become a system open to the other, but only when the other is there for us. In conclusion, I wanted to be as precise as possible to give you an overview of what bioenergetic analysis is in its foundation and in its current evolution. Experience showed that it addresses and adapts to all cultures because bioenergetic principles are universal. For those of you who discover bioenergetic analysis by participating in these webinars. I wish you a good tasting. I have presenting with you the appetizer, and there are still 5 good dishes to be enjoyed in the coming weeks. Thank you very much. Now I'm open to your question.
Just a second. Okay, thank you, Guy, for the beautiful speech. I see that you received a lot of compliments and there are many questions. I will start with the first 5 and then we'll see if we have the time for other questions, okay? So the first question is just a sec, because I'm gonna read it. What is the difference between bioenergetic analysis and sensomotor theory? That's the first question that we had. Big question.
Do you give me 3 hours to answer that question? I guess bioenergetic analysis is an analysis. I mean, it's a combination of Freudian, Reich, and Lowenian theory and practice, and this is more that energetic or sensory or motor or emotional. This is really a co-integration of these 5 functions. So I don't know what to say more in a simple way.
No, you said very well, I think, because I think the basic difference is you put the analytic level. Also, we are a more, I think we are a therapy that, as you said in your introduction, is broad for many problems, not just for trauma and what we know how to use trauma. So that is another difference, I think, if I can say that is analytic and psychomotoria, psychosomatic, and also analytic. The second question is it's a little bit, you have to say, good afternoon, dear colleagues. Are there any authors that study adjunctive disorder? What I understood in terms of bioenergetic analysis, I think he said if he see the disorder, the character structure as a disorder. So we want to know if there are authors that study different character structure. That's my understood of the question.
So I'm sorry, I had a problem to hear the question.
There are any authors who study adjunctive disorder in terms of bioenergetic analysis? I think he want to know if we study different character structure and see the character structure as a disorder. That is not exactly that.
If the character structure is what?
A disorder, personality disorder.
No, a character structure is not a disorder. A character structure is the organization of the personality in response of what happened in the childhood. Probably one of the response we call borderline is not a character, is a state. It's not a character because the borderline couldn't develop a real West structures defensive system. But the other kind of characters could develop really a good organized defensive system. So they are an answer to the infantile history, and they helped really the child and the adult to adapt. Of course, today they limit also the creative way of being of oneself. That's why we can help patient to make conscious their character and or their disorders, and to decide what they want to change, to build, to adapt more for being more alive and happy in life.
Thank you, Guy. Another question is, how does mindfulness integrate with bioenergetic analysis? So, another big question.
Yes, mindfulness has become a very popular experience, a very popular way of practicing some body-mind consciousness. But I mean, mindfulness is included in bioenergetic since the beginning. Really, it's not named, it's not called mindfulness, but the sense of Lowenian approach is how to be conscious of whom we are in our mind and in our body, and of course in our relationship. So this is all the work of being conscious of oneself at the double level of the mind consciousness through representations and perceptions, and also at the body level through energetic flows, vitality, sensations, movements, emotional flows. So mindfulness, up to me, is part of bioenergetic analysis since the beginning.
Thank you. Another question is about Michael. Do emotions come before thoughts, or are they result of thoughts, belief, interpretation? Or emotion come maybe often unconscious?
So I try to.
It's difficult. I'll try to say it again. Do emotions come before thoughts, or they are the result of thoughts, belief, interpretation, even or often unconscious?
Okay, if I understand well, this is a question about what is the relationship between the emotion and thoughts, and if, okay. Well, I was talking during my speech through the image of the house and the 5 functions of the self. I was saying, if we could build stairs between all the levels of the human being, we can walk, we can travel inside of ourselves. Sometimes we begin thinking, and thinking is stimulating emotions. So I begin to think to something and I have emotions. So first come a thought, and that thought stimulates an emotion. But sometimes it's the opposite, it's from down to up. And first I have some emotional state, and that emotional state is stimulating images, thoughts. And sometimes I try thinking to give a sense to what happened in me emotionally. Of course, some people are what we call dissociated. So they have no or few stairs between their different floors. And it's very difficult for them when we ask, what do you feel? To think about what they feel and to find the good words to name what they feel. And this will be our work as bioenergetic therapists to build now. It's not too late to build these stairs and to co-integrate, for instance, thoughts with emotions, emotions with thoughts, or sensations also with thoughts.
Thank you very much. And another question that is very interesting is it's possible to see from the body language, from the posture, or the chronicization, how the disturb is chronic, how the disorder is in the body of the person in a chronical way.
Yes, this was this was the famous body lecture invented by Lowen. What means Lowen by body lecture? He said that all the child history and first pre-verbal history is imprinted in the brain and in the body. The baby, through repeated experiences, is really structuring his house, his self. So, for instance, when a baby, since his first days of life, is living a permanent fear, when, for instance, his mother is looking at that baby with eyes like that and with a tone of voice like that, this baby is just feeling fear and responding with that, what Porges called hypo-excitation and immobilizing. Of course, repeating this experience, he's developing a kind of immobilizing body. And later will show that kind of form of being. And if we are attentive to that person, we can see, we can make that lecture, body lecture. This person is immobilized internally, has few sensorial emotional movements internally. This person is like 30, 40, 50 years before in state of stress, deep stress. So yes, we can, as a bioenergetic analyst, look at somebody, look how the body is structured, where are the tensions, the muscular tensions, and through the postures, and begin to have a first comprehension of that person. So today, we have two lectures. We have the body lectures, and we can read also the attachment bones. And this is incredible, and this is really a passionate.
Very powerful.
Lectures.
Thank you, Guy. Another question is if you can name again the author of trauma release exercise. They want to know the name of the authors. They want to know the name of the authors of the trauma releasing exercise. David Best.
So
just the name, because then there is another. Can I say the name? David Berzelli.
Yeah, it's the method David Berzelli name tree.
Okay.
This is trauma releasing exercises. Tree. The T of trauma, R of releasing, I of exercises.
Okay. Another question is, what type of character structure has the great energy availability? What kind of character structure has more energy in a sense?
So, I suppose that more visible energy, energy expressed, because, for instance, schizoid character can have a lot of energy, but totally blocked, a lot blocked. Rigid character can have a lot of energy, but it can be relative, it can be controlled by all these tensions of the musculature. So if I have a rigid character, I have a lot of energy, a good energy, but I control my expressiveness, you know.
Yes.
So
it's difficult.
The answer of the question depends on, is there a lot of energy in the house, in the self, or is there expressive energy?
And that goes to another question.
Yes.
You can please suggest a book where we can find exercise to develop the 6 properties of the attachment in the house that you were talking about.
So this book is not still written. Oh, I created these 6 exercises, these 6 properties, because that comes from different authors of attachment theory. So I put it together to create that 6 properties of attachment theory and all these exercises. So there is no books for the moment.
But you are prepared.
One article, but it is in Portuguese, in Brazilian.
But the one was also translated, was in the IIBA journal, right? Or not?
No, it was in a South American journal of body-mind analysis.
So I hope so you will translate, at least in English, and we will translate in Italian.
So,
okay?
And I promise you to write a specific article on the 6 properties of attachment for our IIBA journal in the coming month.
Okay, yes. Thank you very much. And I don't know how much time we have, because there was another question about
maybe the last one. Yes,
the last one. So I'll choose breathing and truth.
A good one, a good question.
Okay, so I'll try to find it. I think the question, the most important is if I will put together 2 or 3 questions. One, how you can work with the patient that has a borderline disorder with an energetic model. And another is because it's a person that works with the dependency. How is important to work in Bioenergetic with dependency, pathologic dependency, like gambling, smoking, marijuana, or drugs, etc. So those 2 about the pathology, how to treat pathology in a sense in Bioenergetic.
I guess today we can really work with all kind of pathology. We can work of what Freud called more neurotic pathology that correspond to Lowenian characters. We really can work with, and now what we call drugs, alcohol, and so on. They are symptoms. So they can be symptoms of schizoid or narcissistic, or they are symptoms of person that are unhappy and that can find something or to stimulate their life when they are so blocked that they are not enjoying their life. And also, I would say that we can work, of course, we can work with borderline disorders. We do it, and we do it as it's very interesting response, the bioenergetic response, to build boundaries, to help that person to build boundaries, muscular boundaries, to have this person to take again these images, to build doors and windows to their house to contain, not to be invaded, not to invade the others. But I could say we can work also with psychotic persons. As you said, Patricia, at the beginning presenting me, I was a young therapist, and I worked in the psychiatric hospital some years with schizophrenic young adults. And it was the opportunity for my colleagues to look at a new perspective, which was a body-mind perspective, bioenergetic analysis. And it was, I could say, like spectacular, in the sense that there were deeply dissociated persons, of course, the schizophrenic adults, and helping them what exactly like with babies or little children, beginning from the first step, that is body step, through very basic sensations, body sensations, and through the link, attachment link. So they just needed to meet somebody, the therapist, that could be really present for them, could be develop an attachment link, and propose them some very simple exercises to feel their body, not to think, not to analyze, just to begin again like a baby, to have body sensations. So I guess really today that bioenergetic analysis can respond to all kinds of pathologies.
Thank you very much, Guy, for your generosity, for to give to us so much, and I think you receive a lot of compliment. You can see after on the chat when you can see again your intervention. I really thank you for the generosity that you give also to the bioenergetic community to do that. And I invited. We have to close now, and I want to invite everybody to see another very interesting webinar that will be done by Louise Fréchette, a Canadian international trainer, that we will start with something traditional, but it will be, if see in a more broader way, that is the schizoid character structure. Thank you again to Guy and to all the participants, and again to Marco and all the staff that help us in this adventure. Bye-bye. Good night.
Thank you, Patricia.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.